in class, you've got to have a top-down version of the story of the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 60s. Sort of, what does a textbook say? What does Miss Langert or Mr. Welle say? That's very different from hearing the bottom-up story of someone who lived it and walked through it. Billy, the most common question asked by students was this: what was it like to be a kid during the years of segregation? What are some particular memories that you recall from those years?
Well, I'm gonna first of all say good morning. My first year going into an integrated school, my first year, and you see the little smirk on my face, I was mad, I was upset, I had been crying, I didn't want to go. What was it like? Grades 1 through 4, I was at an all-black school, had many friends, and it was a community school. But after the Brown versus Board of Education, and school could be segregated, desegregated, there were some pastors in our area who decided that we was going to go to the white school and integrate the school. That divided our community. The pastors, the leaders stood up and decided that we were going to do it. And there was about 30 people, 30 families who said they were going to do it. But there was so much struggle during the beginning time, so much pain, so much fighting, that when it came time to actually go to school, to that all-white school the first time, it came down to like 4 families. Out of 30, it came down to 4, and there was 12 of us, 12 people who walked into that school on the first day. And walking into that school on the first day, after so many tears, I had cried every night because I did not want to go. But you know, my daddy made sure that our hair was combed, our clothes was pressed, we was good and clean, because, you know, there was this certain thing about us that every time we would meet people on the street or see them in a grocery store or something like that, they would act like we was nasty, act like we was stinking, and they would make different kind of gestures at us. So my dad was going to make sure that we was not nasty, we was not stinking, we didn't smell. We went down, we had Vaseline all over, the face was shining, hair was shining, shoes was shining. But we walked in that day, I never will forget it. We walked in, there was a line of people who was trying to stop us from getting to that school office. All called us all kind of names, threw rocks at us, and we finally made it to the office. And the principal said, "What can I do for you?" And my dad, who was the leader, he was the lead pastor, there was 4 pastors. He said, "We want to enroll these children in school." And immediately he said, "No, I'm not going to do it." But we stood there, and finally he decided to let us in. But they put us all in one little dark room. All of us, all 12 of us, in one dark room, and just locked us away. In that one little dark room under the gym. So you can imagine now, I go from having all these friends and feeling so good at school every day, but now my anxiety level is so high until all I could do was cry on a daily basis. And every day, it stayed like that for a year. They brought a person in, a black person in to teach us. And that black person teaching us was not even a certified teacher. They were just there to control us, to make sure we didn't go anywhere. We couldn't go to lunch with everybody else. We couldn't go to recess with everybody else. We had to stay there until everybody else was inside. Then we could go out for about 5 minutes, but we had to go right back in that dark hole. And I mean, on and on. And that went on for my 5th grade year and the beginning part of my 6th grade year. It's really like a blur in my mind. Grades 5 through 8 was awful.
Do you have a memory, a particular memory of something that happened to your family or to you? A lot of students were asking about any particular memories of experiencing, you know, what you just shared was gripping and horrifying, but other examples of something that might have happened to your family or you sort of within your community in those years that has stuck with you through all these years.
And I remember my daddy stopping at this place in Jackson, Mississippi. And it was a hot dog stand. We walked up to the hot dog stand, and they had an inside, of course, but they wouldn't let us in. And then when they came to the window, the little window on the side, and they said to my daddy now, they said, "Boy, you know we don't serve your kind here. And if you want anything here, you go to the back and we'll hand it out the back door." And I'm like, surely not. I'm like, "Daddy, let's go. We're not gonna take this." But to see my dad go to the back and with tears in his eyes, because we were hungry. And to see him hear him be called a boy, and I looked up on him as a strong man, but to hear somebody call him boy, that stuck with me, and it puts something down in my spirit that this got to change. I'm a young guy, but this got to change. So that smirk on my face, it started then.
I would love for you to maybe help explain how you started getting, so you have this kind of burning feeling of injustice. This is wrong, this is not okay, this isn't right. How did that turn into action? How did that kind of, as you're going through and starting to be, you know, educated in an integrated school, even though you didn't want to be, even though you're kind of separated out within that integrated school, how did you turn that burning feeling of injustice into action through, and even using some of those different pieces of inspiration to kind of help you out?
Well, as I said, my dad was a pastor, and he was a leader in the community, and he always preached this sermon, and I heard it many sermons, he preached about continuously from Psalms 46. When he said, you know, if God is for you, then who could be against you? And he kept on saying, God is for you. But then to go right out of the church and to see somebody, or hear somebody call him boy, or to see him and say, yes sir, no sir, you know, and to know that we had to go and work on somebody else's land because we didn't have any land. And so my thing was like, who is this God that's supposed to be for us when we are treated like we some kind of disease or something? I mean, why is it such a bad thing to be black? I mean, so this burning started in my heart because I saw how my daddy was treated. He's supposed to be a man, the one we looked up to in the community. We looked up to him. Everybody looked up to him, and then to see him being disrespected. And then when I started to challenge it, then I like, what's up with this? And when he told me, he said, boy, you just remember, he said, this is a white man's world. I said, but you talking about God, love all of us? So how's it a white man's world? And that started a burning within me that said something got to change. Because if you're going to preach about God love us and he's for us, then I got to find out what's going on. Because I don't want no religion like that. And during that same time, you know, Dr. King was preaching one message, and Malcolm X was preaching another message. And as a younger person, I was torn between those two because I had this thing burning within me, like this God can't be for us, but it still put a burning inside of me that I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to make a difference. And that difference came. I can go ahead there, but by the time I was 11th grade, we wanted to have a Black History Day, But the principal and I had the school thing is a whole other thing by the time I'm in 11th grade. We had a black principal and a white principal. The white principal said, you can't have a Black History Day. The black principal said, you can. They was at each other. I was the president of the class. And after they told us no, I'm like, okay, something got to change. So here in the 11th grade, I cried out, went down the hallway to all the students. I said, we're gonna march out of the school because they don't want to give us our day. We're gonna march out of the school. And we marched out of the school. And they had to turn school out because we would go back in. And they gave us our day.
And is that where your participation in protests, like that's where it started? And then did it continue on? Would you mind telling us kind of how that continued on throughout your life?
Well, you know, I can remember the protest. There was major protests when Dr. King was killed. Number one, I remember having to go back to school the next day and to see people make a mockery of it. It was like, we got Martin Luther King, we killed him, killed Martin Luther King. And they was laughing at me and talking about it. I cried all day. But then if you look back in history, you're gonna see that was in every major city throughout America, there was a march. There was a marching. I mean, it was violence. It was all this going on. People were upset because we feel like the person, one of our main people who was our leader during that time had just been assassinated. And we felt like America did it.
How do you not resent those individuals? How do you were treated with such cruelty, such carelessness, such disrespect, as you mentioned multiple times? How do you still love those individuals? How do you work through those things? Because that could very easily, that burning desire, that burning feeling of injustice could so easily turn to anger and resentment and hatred. How do you not have that happen?
Well, I got saved when I was 15 years old. And we was going through so much, and I heard Daddy talk about this God so much. And I had a Sunday school teacher that challenged me. I've been in church all my life. Okay? We would go to church all day on Sunday, because my daddy was a pastor. Went to Sunday school and 2 Sunday services. He played no basketball on Sunday. So it was ingrained in me about this God, but I didn't believe it. I had a Sunday school teacher who confronted me and asked me the question, did I know the Lord Jesus and the pardon of my sin? And I said no. At age 15, I said no. And didn't want to know him. Not if he was like that. But then he gave me the plan of salvation. He walked me through it. He confronted me, walked me through it, and I accepted the Lord Jesus as my Savior. And that's what began to make a difference in my being able to love people that I know didn't love me, to love people that hated me. And I had to work on it, because just because I accepted Jesus that day, it didn't mean that everything went away. It didn't go away, because I still had a lot of things that happened over years, and I still had challenges. And matter of fact, just to speed up here, I had a challenge when I came to Minnesota as a pastor in South Minneapolis. John Piper released a book called Bloodlines. And in that book he called Bloodlines, he had me to be on stage with him when he released the book on a big podcast that went worldwide. He told about when he was growing up, they had a servant in their house, a black servant in his house in South Carolina. And he admitted how they treated them and how they made her work, how she ironed their clothes, she cooked for them, she cleaned the house. And at that moment, my mind went straight back to what my mom had to do. My mom had to clean other folks' house, cook for them. She could even cook for food was not ready for us when we got home because she was cooking for somebody else. She was cleaning somebody else's house. And that was the only job she had. So look, that night, I'll be honest, I got angry on the stage and doing a book release. And the way I came back at him, I didn't realize it was there, but it was there. I was upset, I was hurt. And the anger was well up in me, I began to cry. But then when I realized what had happened, I asked the church and everybody on the podcast that night to forgive me. And I asked Jesus to forgive me. I'm sorry. Help me to grow from this, because I didn't realize it was still there. There's some stuff that was still there, that was well inside of me, that I hadn't outgrown yet. But guess what? I'm still growing. There's times lots of stuff come up right now, and it'll come up in me, and I had to catch myself and say, but God, that's who controls me. God keeps me. When I can't keep myself, it's God that keeps me. But that anger came at me. And I realized what could happen in the midst of anger. So I had to pray, even as a child, as a student. I had to pray and ask God to help me to deal with that. I had severe anger issues because of all the things that had happened in my life. And even now, I still have to ask God to help me every day. Because when I tell you, now those things happened when I was a student. But when George Floyd was killed, and I hope it's okay to say that, my church is located about 5 blocks from what happened. That's where my church is located there. And we was in the midst of COVID and all of this stuff, and then everybody was already, nerve was on the edge, and there had been other brutalities that had happened, and had upset the community during my time as pastor, and this just took everything over the edge. So you can imagine now, my people upset, I'm trying to keep them calm, I'm trying to preach love, I'm trying to preach we're better together, but I'm getting hate mail from black folks and hate mail from white folks. I'm like, Lord, what do I do? So I'll be honest, I got, again, that anger came up in me. I'm like, here we go again. Why do we have to do this? And then when I get a call from the FBI saying that there's a threat out on your church is going to be burned. There's a hate group that's going to burn Greater Friendship Church down. And I get a call from the FBI. They had a credible threat. And I was able to get to the church. By the time I got there, the neighbors, who were all white, around the church, they had stopped 2 guys with gas cans. They stopped them in their tracks. And the police were able to come get them, and they didn't burn the church down because of neighbors, all white neighbors, in a black church in a white neighborhood. And that's what helped me again to realize, although this anger is in me, but I still say we're better together. And we had a big cookout in that neighborhood, because I would appreciate all those people. If it had not been for them, that church would have been burned to the ground.
Can you clarify what year was that?
Was it 2019?
2019.
Yeah, but George Floyd was killed, yeah.
2020.
2020,
Yeah,
okay.
So we're not talking 1961 here.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
But I got stories from 91.
Yeah, okay. Would you mind sharing, we've been, maybe time for 2 more questions here. Okay. Do you ever feel what happens when it's a comment it's one thing if someone's like literally calling you a slur, an insult, and they mean to insult you. What's it like to wrestle with comments that are meant to be a joke, but are just coming from a hard-hearted place? Like, is that something that you ever struggle with, dealing with anger or resentment or frustration, like jokes that arise out of some place of ignorance or a hard-hearted place? Is this ever something you have to grapple with?
Yeah, I was at the Mayo Clinic on Tuesday, and there was this man. He said, I'm 85 years old. Well, first of all, I was sitting in my place waiting on my wife, who was having a procedure done, and he was sitting in a place, and his wife was back there too. He's 85 years old, so he called me over. And the first thing he said, "Boy, come here." I'm like, "Boy, I know you're old like me. Come here, boy." And he kept on saying "boy" and kept on calling me colored. And then that stuff started coming up. You know, I was like, this dude don't really know me. He called me boy, calling me a colored. I don't know whether he playing or what. But he kept talking, and I realized he just didn't know any better. So I had to correct him politely, lovingly, and let him know. And by the time we finished, I told him, listen, it's not about the color of your skin. It's about your qualification. I feel like if I'm qualified for a job, I already get that job, not based on whether I'm black or white. So by the time we finished, he appreciated me telling him and helping him understand the difference between calling me a boy, and I'm 65, he's 85. I mean, he's older than me, but still, you're not going to disrespect me like that, because my mind went all the way back to when they was calling my daddy boy. And I'm like, I got children. I got a son that's 45 years old. You gonna call me boy? You know, so I could have really went off on him, but because of the love of Jesus.
I really appreciate the extent to which you're helping. As you tell these stories, it's not that you were 15 and a bit of religious magic occurred and then the anger just went away, right? This is an ongoing wrestling match.
Ongoing.
And so many of us are gonna have some ongoing wrestling match. And maybe it is with anger, right? And maybe like Billy, it's anger that arises from a very real place, from some very grave thing that was done to us. And maybe it's just an entirely different wrestling match. But the life of following Jesus is gonna be a wrestling match, right? It's gonna be stuff in our sin nature we're gonna have to wrestle down. And I just so much admire the way you're modeling that. I want to ask a question, and I think it's a meaningful question, and I don't want to ask it when there's only 30 seconds left. So I want to ask, what is something that you wish for this generation of Americans that we are sort of passing a baton onto? What's something you want for these young Americans?
I am happy that you all are at least talking about this, that you're studying what happened during the civil rights time, because there are so many places that don't want this to happen. They don't want it to be taught. They don't want America's history to be taught. Don't want it to be known. But let me tell you, America needs to know its history. It's one thing to know the facts about what truly happened. It's good to know what happened, to study the history. And I'm glad that, because I was not taught anything about history when I was about black history. Everything I got, I had to read about it. I read books after books after books after books. I probably read about 5, 6 books every at least a month to learn. But here it is. Out of all the facts I have about what truly happened, and even what I grew up in. But what makes a difference is relationships. If you want to truly make a difference, we got to build relationships. You got to get to know me. A lot of stuff that happened to me growing up, because people didn't know me, they didn't understand me, they looked at me differently just because my skin color was different. But hey, when we get to talking to each other, when we hang out with each other, you get to know me, you find out that we're better together. That's my takeaway. I want you all to take away from this. Let's build relationships. Because Jesus loves us, and he gives us another chance. In spite of us, in spite of the things we've done, in spite of the things we've said, he gives us another chance. So I'm just saying, give me a chance to get to know me in your relationships every day. And if you see somebody doing something to somebody that's wrong and you know it's wrong, call them out on it. If you see something, say something. If you hear somebody using slurs or anything, look, check them on it, call them out on it. Because if you don't call them out on it, that means you're agreeing with it. So the only way we stop this stuff is people got to be called out. Like I called a man out the other day, in a loving way. You know, I'm not a boy, I'm not your son, and I would appreciate if you call me black rather than just colored, okay? because you colored too. All right.
Would you please show our appreciation for Billy Russell here this morning?